he set the proper example on us how to act. If you look at the golden rule, Jesus wasn't a ruler that said, do as I say, not as I do. He actually walked the walk and talked the talk. And why is that so effective as a leader and a ruler to really make sure that the subjects are doing what the king is doing?
Yeah, it's a good example. The golden rule is found in Matthew chapter 7. Many people know it as do unto others as you would want them to do to you. And I guess that's the easy way of expressing it. But in the New World Translation, it's rendered in a different way, just a little more specific. It says, all things, therefore, that you want men to do to you, you also must do to them. And then he says, in fact, this is what the law and the prophets mean. So all things you want men to do to you, you must likewise do to them. Now, why is that superior to the way we go about our business? Well, typically, humankind, even from earlier time, humankind, the way they go about it is, if you do good to me, I'll do good to you. But look at this. This goes to the root of the problem. This goes to the root of the law and the principles of the law. All things you want men to do to you, you must likewise do to them. So this takes on our part, what would my neighbor, what would my wife, what would my children, what would my brother, my sister, what would they want from me in this situation? And then we have to be moved by that thinking, pondering on that, our desire to help them. We must be moved to do it. That's the superior way. That's the supreme law. That's what the law of love is all about. Looking for a chance to help somebody according to the way that you would want to be helped. So, for example, discrimination is a perfect example, right? If I were of this ethnicity or of this language, how would I like to be treated if I came to an organization, a religion, a group, work, and I didn't know the language, or I didn't look like anybody else? How would I want to be treated? And as we ponder that, we don't have to be given a rule or a law. That principle affects every part of our life. From driving down the highway, somebody's tailgating me and wants to get around me. Well, the visceral response is, I'm angry, I'm going to slow down and make him miserable. But the response to that principle is, I'm going to move over because that's what I would want somebody to do. And I'm not going to do something to get even with that person. You see, it can affect the smallest things that we do to the very largest things that we do. In a sense, when would I want to be defended, even physically? And all of those things now, as a Christian, that's why there's not a lot of laws in the Greek scriptures, right? The law of the Christ consists of principles, that being one of the primary.
And Robert, when we think of Jesus when he was on earth and kind of set an example for ones who are following him, did he want his followers to get involved in government while they're waiting for that kingdom to come?
Well, that's an excellent question, because the emotional response of many would be, of course, Jesus wants us to make our communities better. And that is true. Jesus wants us to make our communities better. But what does he want when it comes to our political affiliations? That's a very, very powerful point. There's two primary principles that we look to, right? And there's a number of scriptures, but let's start with Romans chapter 13. Romans chapter 13 talks about being in subjection to the superior authorities. We recognize, it says right in Romans 13, that the authorities stand placed in their positions by God. We get it. Jehovah allows it. God allows them to be here. And we're thankful for that because it gives us freedoms, it gives us services. That's one of the principles. The secondary principle is the principle that of Jesus that he set forth in Matthew and in the Gospels, where he was given a Roman coin. He was being asked, should we pay taxes? And it was a trap, but he took the coin and he said, whose inscription is that? They said, Caesar's. He said, give back Caesar's things to Caesar, but God's things to God. So what is Caesar looking for from us? They're looking for taxes. They're looking for obedience and law to their law. They're looking for tribute, right? And we owe them that. That's, Jesus said that. We owe that to Caesar. But what are God's things? Well, it's our life. It's our devotion. It's our heart, right? These are the things that Jehovah has given us that we can only give to him, which is why we don't fight in behalf of any government. So those are two principles. And then in his prayer on his final night for his disciples, he set forth the guideline. He said in prayer to his Father that his followers would be no part of the world. Now, of course, we live in the world. He said, don't take them out of the world, but they will be no part of the world. Well, what did that mean? Well, they just had to go back to the way Jesus stood in front of Pilate and said, my kingdom is no part of this world. If my kingdom were part of this world, my disciples would have fought. So all of those scriptures, that's why we really feel the Bible interprets itself. What do we conclude from them? Number one, we have to respect the governments. Number two, the governments deserve our obedience. But number three, that obedience is only with reference to what we owe Caesar. We don't owe Caesar our life. We don't owe Caesar our heart. We don't owe Caesar our devotion, our dedication. We've given that as an oath to God. And we remember how the apostles carried that out in Acts chapter 5. When they were brought before the Sanhedrin, which was really the supreme court of the land, they said, we must obey God as ruler rather than man. So they didn't mean that they were disobedient to the laws, but where the laws told them to do things that were against Bible principles, that they owed to God and not to Caesar, they refused. So those are the principles that give us an understanding of Christian neutrality and how we decide what to do and how to participate in the process from community, town board, county, city, federal, and world politics.
And Robert, why have some governments looked at the neutrality of the witnesses as trying to subvert the government, trying to overthrow the government, sedition? Why are some governments viewing witnesses' neutrality as that?
Well, we can only assume that they don't know us. We can't ascribe wrong motives to them because we just don't know. In some cases, it might be. But the fact is, if your neighbor is a witness, you don't have to worry about your neighbor. In fact, it's interesting that we're neutral in politics and governmental affairs. You know what that means? We're obedient. So we pay our taxes. We don't stand against what the government does with its money is its business. We do not stand in protest of the government, even whether we agree with the leader from a religious or moral perspective or not. It's not our business to stand up against the government. That is what neutrality is all about. And so for some governments of this world, totalitarian regimes, and others to say that Jehovah's Witnesses are extremists, well, it's just untrue, and we can only assume that they don't know who we are, and that we are among their most law-abiding citizens when it comes to obedience to their laws and the payment of taxes. And so in some cases, maybe it's ignorance. In other cases, maybe there's something more nefarious behind it. But in whatever case it is, even when they're persecuted, we are obedient to the government, even when the government is persecuting us or has restricted our work. In Russia, we're still the most law-abiding citizens in the land, but yet our work has been banned. And our assets as an organization have been confiscated by the government. But that hasn't changed our obedience and respect for them as leaders of that particular country.
Yeah, I noticed. I haven't seen on the news Jehovah's Witnesses heading out to the streets and protesting. We've noticed that. And why? Why not? I mean, you answered that. So I don't want to go back to that. You answered that, Robert. So let me move on to the next question.
I mean, it'll just never happen.
Yeah.
To go out and protest the government would be actually to act against our Christianity, to break our neutrality. We go back to this whole campaign. We respect the right of people to campaign for their government, for their politician, for their leader. We do not interfere with that. But our campaign is for God's kingdom. And really, that's what this whole global campaign about God's kingdom is all about.
And Robert, has there been any feedback from the campaign or anything, or is that going to be on another show we do together?
Well, we hope that there's going to be a lot of great feedback from the campaign. For the United States, we have really begun the campaign post-election, especially from our branch office from Waukegan. We have sent out, and we continue to send out thousands of letters to Congress and the Supreme Court right from here, and our local affiliates of our public information will be. Our regions will be sending out to the state governments and the local congressional offices, and then our congregations are sending out to the local officials on a town level, village level, and city level. So for us, we waited till after the election so that we would hopefully get the most notice from those opening their mail, and for some of our brothers also who are sending letters around to congressmen around the country. We also had to wait for the civil unrest to kind of calm down to make sure that it was safe for them to deliver large quantities of mail to the post office. But I will say that what we've received so far from people is the predominant response is surprise. Why? Well, because in all of the letters where we are actually personalizing these letters, we're also commending them. In the case of the letters coming out of the branch, we're commending them for their work, particularly on a subject, maybe something that was close to their heart. And we do appreciate what they do. And so some have called us or who have written us and said, thank you for thanking me, because I don't get a lot of constituent mail that thanks me for what I do.
No, that really shows how the witnesses are law-abiding citizens and appreciative, for what ones do for them. And like you said, treat people the way you want to be treated. And we can definitely see that in action. And Robert, when we look at the subject of God's kingdom, all these things that ones can look forward to, is that when they get to heaven? Is that when all these things are going to take place? Does that magazine address that?
Oh, yeah, it does. It certainly does. We only have to go back to the law, what actually the Lord's Prayer, right? Jesus said, and if we take it from the King James Version, he said, pray then this way. He said, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. So put your name on high, sanctify it, right? Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done in heaven as on earth. Very simple. And then it goes into forgive us our trespasses. But so what was he saying? What are we praying for? In that we find the teaching. We're praying for God's kingdom to come to the earth, and for God's kingdom and his purpose and his will to be done on earth. Now, some may say his will is being done now on earth, but the Bible clearly says from start all the way to finish that it would be the meek that would inherit the earth. That there would be no wickedness on a cleansed earth under God's kingdom. That we would not be suffering sickness and death, because that was his original purpose. So all he is saying, and all we're praying for is we're praying for Jehovah God to get his will accomplished, to accomplish his will on the earth. The will that was set forth in his purpose in the Garden of Eden thousands of years ago. You know, many people feel like our hope is in heaven, our salvation is in heaven, and we get that. We understand why people feel that way. But from the perspective of God, why would he abandon his original purpose? It really, it's illogical for a God of perfect wisdom, right? He's omniscient, all the strength, he's omnipotent. And he says, this is what I want to do with the earth. He sets forth on that journey to do that purpose. And two people sin. Does that mean he abandons his purpose? It's illogical to think that he would. And so the provision of a heavenly salvation, which is absolutely real, we do believe that some will be going to heaven, is to facilitate his purpose here on the earth. And that heavenly government is where folks will be going, those who have been anointed and chosen, so that they can assist in bringing this earth back to its original paradise.
And Robert, you bring up a very good point that I'm sure ones who are listening right now are thinking like God's original purpose. So if Adam and Eve never had sinned, where would they be today? Probably here on earth, right?
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, what God said was, fill the earth and subdue it, bring into subjection the fish of the sea, the flying creatures of the heavens. So when he said that fill the earth, he meant your children will fill the earth, and that will come true. Their children will fill the earth. When he said to bring it under subjection, he meant to take that paradise, which we don't know how large it was probably significant, and to extend it to the borders of the entire earth, to make it a global paradise. They were given that gift, that blessing, that privilege to do that, to be our parents. Of course, they lost their lives because they disobeyed. They struck out on an independent course. But they changed. Their eventuality changed, but ours doesn't have to. Because God's will was for their children to inherit the earth, a perfect earth, under perfect conditions. And he's going to see to it that it gets done. And he's going to do that through his kingdom under Christ Jesus. And that is going to happen in the near future.
And Robert, what about those who of our family members that have died already, who many were thinking they were up in heaven watching down on all of us, and up in heaven? What about them? What's going to happen to them?
Well, both Jesus and Paul have made a similar statement. Jesus in John 5:28 and 29, where he said, "Do not marvel at this, for the hour is coming when all those in the memorial tombs will hear my voice and come out." We love that term. Some Bibles say grave, but the grave really is a physical location. That term memorial tomb, which is more accurate and has more fidelity to the original Greek, really says it all. That your loved one is in God's memory. And because God created that loved one, he'll be able to refashion a body for that individual and bring that individual back exactly the person that left us, except under perfect conditions, and not growing older and sicker, but actually growing to perfection. We'll be able not only to see them again, but to see them grow to perfection along with us, and we'll do that together. We'll be able to meet them and teach them what happened. Because many of them will think, because it's only a twinkling of an eye, if you will, they'll wake up and they just had died on their hospital bed or in their own bed or in an accident. They'll wake up and many of them will think they're in heaven, because guess what? It'll look like heaven from their perspective. We have no concept of heaven, right? People talk about, well, it's the great golf course in the sky. I'll do all the things that I want to do, and that will be earth. That's what God meant it to be. It'll be the physical place where David said in Psalm 37, "You will look for the wicked one, and he will not be. But the meek ones themselves will possess the earth, and they will find their exquisite delight in the abundance of peace." And later on in that same chapter, he said they would live forever on it. So we'll be welcoming them back, not to this crazy place that we live in, because nobody would want to be welcomed back into such discord and a pandemic, but into a place that will be free from a pandemic, free from discord, where love will be the principal way that we will rule and deal with each other.
And Robert, the campaign that the witnesses are involved in this month, that magazine highlights this and much more. And Robert, thank you again for stopping by and sharing this with us. How the organization is being safe, but making sure that they are taking care of ones out there when it comes to God's word. We really appreciate it. And Robert, if ones haven't gotten their copy of this special Watchtower, how can they obtain one?
Well, they can just navigate right to jw.org. And actually, all through November, right at the top of the homepage will be a highlighted article from that particular magazine. And they can just tap on that and read it all, download it in PDF form or in their Watchtower library if they have the app on their phone, which is a free app, which also gives you a free Bible in well over 100 languages. Or, if they don't want to do that, they can contact their local Jehovah's Witness, whomever they might know, give them a call, or contact the local Kingdom Hall, which we're monitoring the phones. We're not using the Kingdom Halls. Or go to that website and ask for a visit. And they won't get a personal visit, but a virtual visit or a phone call. And we'll be happy to not only provide that to them, but also explain it to them and spend time studying the Bible with them to help them to understand why we believe what we believe and why we have such hope even in the middle of the worst pandemic of our lives.
And that is so true, Robert. That is so true. Before I let you go, is there anything else that you wanted to touch on or say to the viewer and the listener out there?
I think that, last time we talked about the regional convention going virtual. And really, in retrospect, we talked about it being a modern day miracle because within about 8 weeks, the 10 weeks, the regional convention was uploaded in a virtual format in what ended up being 511 languages. And so the entire world was able to benefit over 6 weeks of time during the summer months. But that was kind of a stopgap measure that was done so that we could not miss this great event. This time, we have looked to the future and made it a proactive decision, and that decision is not to hold in-person conventions again in the many cities that we do around the world, around the United States, which means that we're preparing a virtual convention again, and that virtual convention will be available to all. We'll make sure that we let everyone know how to do that. We'll actually invite people to view that convention with us in sometime in the summer. And it probably, just like this year, it will come at exactly the right time. We talked about joy last year during a pandemic, and that's 6 weeks. And next year we will have a similar theme that will really highlight why we can have hope in these very, very difficult times that we're living in. So we're looking forward to sharing that with your viewers in the future.
We appreciate that. Will we see Jade again telling us to let's do this? Are we going to see that?
I don't know if Jade will make a comeback, but we'll see the same kinds of format where we're teaching through many videos and very personal, touching and emotional reenactments that dramatize the life that we're living, and many who have been able to achieve good results by applying Bible principles.
All right. Robert, always great to catch up with you and talk with you. Looking forward to catching up with you again. And please stay safe and stay well. And we wish you nothing but the best, my friend.
Thank you. And you too, Paul. We really appreciate it.
Again, I appreciate always having Robert Hendricks, U.S. spokesperson for the Christian Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, joining me to talk about how they are virtually doing a public service for ones around the world, and how the message of a government that we can really get behind and that's really going to take care of us is really admirable, that they are taking time out of their very busy schedule to share that with each and every one of us. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to go to jw.org, one of my favorite websites out there. You know, I'm a tech head. I'm a geek. That website is mind-blowing. Until next time, folks, take care of yourself. I love you all to life. Have a good one.